Mexican officials, including the country's economy minister, are in Washington as we speak in an attempt to stave off President Trump's most pressing threat. He's given Mexico until June 10th to curb the flow of illegal immigrants across the U.S. border. If they fail to do so, Trump has said he will hit all Mexican imports with a 5% tariff, and that level could reach as high as 25% in the coming months. Mexico's foreign minister said the action won't solve anything.
Tariffs could cause financial and economic instability, which means that Mexico could reduce its capacity to address migration flows and to offer alternatives to the new migrants who have recently arrived in Mexico.
The Mexican delegation says Trump's tariffs would hurt both countries as well as consumers. Former Mexican ambassador to the United States, Arturo Sarukhán, joins me now from Washington. Ambassador, fantastic to have you with us. I think
Julie.
President Trump's calculation here, though, is the threat of economic damage to Mexico here will force the Mexican government to take action on these migrant flows. Is that right or wrong?
That may be his gambit by doing this, but it's absolutely wrong and it's misguided. The president is standing in the intersection of reckless and suicidal when it comes to Mexico policy. Reckless because he could collapse the strategic relationship that has been built between Mexico and the United States, which, by the way, was built on one very important premise. You don't mix apples and pears. That is, if you've got a challenge or an issue on immigration, you solve it on that issue alone, and you don't contaminate it by bringing in a trade issue like what the president did on Friday. And suicidal because of the impact this will have on both economies and on the North American perspectives of a speedy ratification of the newly revamped USMCA, which is now in the Canadian Parliament and the Mexican Congress.
Do you think that's the first casualty of this, that as far as the Mexicans are concerned, they're simply not going to agree and finalise that NAFTA Mark II deal while this current tariff, trade, political issue as far as migration flows is concerned?
I think USMCA can certainly be the big casualty, or one of the casualties of this process. I think it's very hard politically for the Mexican government to, as they had done on Friday morning, a couple of hours before the president announced this surprising decision, when the Mexican government had submitted the treaty to Senate ratification in the Mexican Congress. I think it's going to be very hard for that to move forward. And in the meantime, I think the Mexican government shouldn't blink. Because of the boomerang effect of those tariffs on consumers and on businesses in the U.S., Mexico should wait out the initial impact, at least, of those 5% tariffs and have local constituencies in the U.S., governors and mayors and trade associations across the U.S. Remember, Julia, Mexico this quarter became the United States' first largest trading partner in the world. That means that we are producing we're producing together, and we've created supply chains together, and out of every dollar of Mexican exports to the United States, 40 cents of each dollar are U.S. content, U.S. inputs. So you're also slapping 5% tariffs on U.S. content.
You see, if they look at the Chinese example, though, the Mexicans know that if you call this president's bluff, he'll act and he'll slap tariffs on imports. So is that what we're looking at here? If the Mexicans take your advice, we could see tariffs on Mexican imports into the United States hitting 25% by October. Is that where this is headed?
I don't know if it's going to head in that direction. Again, I think what you've already seen in Washington in these past 48 hours of local mayors and governors and members of Congress, Republican members of Congress, pushing back against this, I think should prevent us from reaching that stage. But certainly I think Mexico has done this in the past. It did it in 2009 to enforce trucking provisions in the NAFTA. It did it last year when President Trump applied tariffs on steel and aluminum. Mexico is not toothless. It has devised a way to provide, via carousel of countervailing duties, very specific impacts on districts, on produce, on exports of the United States into Mexico. So I think it is feasible that Mexico could retaliate with a new carousel.
You know, it's interesting. You've said all the way along that Mexico will not pay for a border wall. It's a first-century solution to a 21st century problem. I'm quoting your words here. A lot of people look at this and say, in the short term at least, this is US firms, this is US consumers that pay the cost of tariffs. Do you see this then in the short term as US consumers actually paying the cost of greater border protection and an effective border wall, if this is what the president's trying to tackle here?
Look, if you want to tackle migration, that's fine, and we have to do it together. One of the things that has succeeded in the past is that Mexico face a host of challenges that can only be solved under a paradigm of joint responsibility. And Mexico certainly has the responsibility of working hand in hand with the U.S. to try and prevent transmigration, illegal transmigration of Central American migrants through Mexico on their way to the United States. But that will be dealt with by having a discussion and a conversation on immigration and border security issues, not by bringing in a trade issue and contaminating much of everything else in the U.S.-Mexico bilateral agenda.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in Congress, certainly in the United States, would agree with you, Ambassador. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Great to speak to you.